integrity and efficiency. Through platforms such as Electoral Reform Hour on radio and the nationwide town hall meetings, PACA continues to amplify citizen voices, influence policy discourse, and push for reforms that make Nigeria's democracy more participatory and accountable. At its core, PACA believes that sustainable development and social justice can only be achieved when citizens are informed, engaged, and empowered to hold leaders accountable and actively contribute to governance process.
We know that this event is one that is timely, one that is also intentional. And I can tell you that this is one of the conversations that has also been very prominent across different forums, whether on national TV or on platforms or conferences. But today's event, I would say to you, is one that is not just for Nigeria, but for Nigerians for Nigeria. We are at a time where we are looking at our democratic walk. What does democracy mean to the average Nigerian? How does he or she participate? Is it about elections, or is it about the process before the elections and post the elections? How are voices making impact in different community and ecosystems, and what really defines a Democrat when you talk about it in the true state of the word? But I would like to, first of all, before we go straight into the conversation for today, to bring one man up who is one person I like to call mentor. Another person refers to him as the egalitarian general, one who sees everyone as equal, as participants of democracy. And he's someone that I also know that over the years has mentored several people who has walked the democratic line. Ladies and gentlemen, the man I'm about to call is somebody that I know that you have seen walking around this room, around in the morning, trying to make sure that things are done properly. So I want to welcome to the stage the Executive Director, PACA, Chairman, Board of Trustees, Gender Strategy Advancement International, and also one of the greatest he for she's I have known in the walk of my career. Please let's make welcome to the stage Chief Ezenwa Wago for his welcome address. Please an applause as he comes here. He's gathered us all here today. Thank you so much.
The chairman of today's occasion, the keynote speaker, and our very own guest speaker, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and partners in democracy, on behalf of the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PACA, it is my honor and privilege to welcome you to the National Conference on the Future of Democratic Reforms Beyond the Polls for Effective Governance. This gathering is both timely and significant. As a nation, Nigeria has made important stride in strengthening electoral integrity and broadening citizen participation, yet the journey towards a democracy that truly delivers for all its citizens is far from complete. Our task today is to reflect on the challenges and challenge ourselves and chart actionable pathways for sustaining reforms that will endure well beyond election cycles. At PACA, we have been steadfast in our mission to amplify citizen voices and bridge the gap between policy and people. Over the years, we have convened town hall meetings across more than 20 states, between engaging diverse stakeholders, including traditional rulers, women, youth, and persons living with disabilities, political parties, security agencies, and indeed civil society. These platforms have not only harvested citizens' experiences, but also generated policy recommendations that we have forwarded to the Independent National Electoral Commission and the National Assembly Through our policy briefs, memoranda, and advocacy campaigns, we have contributed to critical national debates, including the push for early voting for essential election workers, the registration of the legislation of INEC result viewing portal, and reserved legislative seats for women, and the creation of unified voter ID system. These recommendations, rooted in citizens' consultations, are now part of Nigerian ongoing electoral conversations and discussions. Beyond policy advocacy, PACA has leveraged media and technology to keep electoral reform in public consciousness. Our radio and television programs, currently at its 40th episode, respectively, have reached millions across states and outside of the country, amplifying and simplifying complex reform issues and sustaining national dialogue. Our monthly newsletter and press releases have provided timely updates, while our social media platforms have created spaces for Nigerians to engage actively with reform issues. In every effort, our goal has remained constant: to ensure that democracy in Nigeria is participatory and inclusive, transparent, and accountable. This conference marks yet another milestone in that journey by bringing together voices from government, legislature, civil society, academia, media, and citizens. We reaffirm our collective responsibility to ensure that democratic reforms are not episodic, but enduring, not elite-driven, but citizen-centered. I would like to end these short remarks by thanking Dr. Olaokwo Hashim, Gbenga Olaokwo Hashim, my boss, comrade, and brother, for inspiring and supporting PACA in this conference. Our partners, sister organizations, and development agencies, and every individual here today for your unwavering support. Your presence underscores shared commitment to building institutions and that outlasts elections and governance. I welcome you once again to this important convening. May our deliberations be fruitful, and this partnership, may it be strengthened, and our collective resolve renewed to safeguard the future of democracy in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
I would go straight to bring in the chairman's opening remarks. And of course, we have seen conversations by this particular man, a seasoned advocate, a Pan-African, currently the director of the Pan-African and Emerging Power Advocacy Office, representative to the African Union based in Addis Ababa. And he was also the country director of CARE International in Nigeria, overseeing one of the country's largest humanitarian and development portfolios. Ladies and gentlemen, please, I would like to welcome to the stage for his chairman's opening remarks, Dr. Hussaini Abdu. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Highnesses, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Just a quick correction. I've been back from my Addis role, and I'm back in Nigeria once again as the country director of CARE. And but thank you for that introduction, my sister. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to welcome you to this very important conversation on the future of democracy in Nigeria and how we could sustain our democratic growth. This gathering comes at a time when Nigeria's democratic experience, now in the third decade of uninterrupted civilian rule, stands as a very critical crossroad. tested by economic hardship, insecurity, declining public trust, and widening inequalities. Yet it also remains alive with the aspirations of citizens who continue to believe that democracy, however imperfect, remains our best hope for justice, peace, and development. Since 1999, Nigeria has made significant democratic strides. Periodic elections, active civil society, greater freedom of expression, and peaceful transfer of power. However, the resilience of our democracy has too often been sustained more by the will of the people than by the strength of our institutions. Today, the challenges are profound. A shrinking civic space, monetized politics, weak accountability, and growing public cynicism about whether democracy truly delivers. These realities compels us to rethink how we practice and protect democracy, not only as a political system, but as a social contract that guarantees dignity and opportunity for all its citizens. Over time, we have conflated democracy with elections. And the perception is that once you have periodic elections, then you have democracy. Unfortunately, that is not true. And the failure to actually connect democracy with public accountability and citizens' participation is what led us to where we are today. That even the election itself is continually undermined by the shenanigans and the subterfuges of our politicians. Our democracy today is being run by people who don't actually believe in democracy. There is a relationship between democracy and the practitioners of it. Once you find an incongruence between the values of the practitioners and the basic principles and ethics of democracy, you have a problem. And that's the problem we have in this country today, that the practitioners of this democracy don't believe in it. Their relationship with democracy is to the extent that it serves their interest. Once the interest is not guaranteed, or the institutions or legal framework cannot guarantee that interest, they will work to undermine it. And we have seen that continually with our electoral laws. Every election season, we work really, really hard to get a new electoral act to support our elections. But that act works only for one election season. By the next elections, they've perfected ways of undermining it. And in the next moment, you are thinking about another electoral act. The challenge is not simply our electoral governance process. The challenge is the values of the people who are running the system. You have political parties who cannot conduct their own elections. They can't manage themselves, but they want to have the credible elections. That is a big contradiction. And that's what makes conversations like this and gathering like this very important. This conference offers us a space to engage deeply with the questions to assess how our democracy can evolve to meet the demands of a new generation, to imagine the reform that strengthen governance, inclusion, and participation, and to ensure that Nigeria's democratic growth is sustained by institutions and that are accountable leaders who are visionary and citizens who are empowered. Let this be more than a meeting of minds. Let it be the beginning of a renewed commitment to defend democratic values, to rebuild trust in governance, and to ensure that the promise of democracy translates into lived realities of freedom, equality, and shared prosperity. On this note, I warmly welcome every one of you and look forward to a rich discussion on both ideas that we can put in place to strengthen our democracy and guarantee our freedom. Thank you very much.
He'll be giving us a keynote address. Please, let's welcome for his keynote Professor Samuel Logu, who is currently the Governance Advisor for the United Nations Development Program in Nigeria and a professor of political, I beg your pardon, a professor of political science in Nigeria, but he is the INEC resident Electoral Commissioner, Benue State.
I want to begin by commending the leadership of PACA. First, for honoring me to give this keynote address. I'm extremely grateful. And it's a very straightforward conversation. How can we expand the frontiers of effective governance beyond the ritual of election every 4-year cycle? I think this is a very big issue. And I believe that we are here because all of us are disturbed by the yawning gap between a democracy that appears to be consolidating, showing signs of consolidation, and yet it is not able to deliver in terms of the material needs of the people. And the statistics is quite baffling in terms of what has happened to human security in this country, in terms of the development outcomes in the area of health, and so on and so forth. So I think it's something that is big for all of us. And I hope we will use the occasion of this conference to do a good reflection. At the same time that we are celebrating this democracy, for elections that have held 7 successive times, leading to transfer of power from one set of elites to another, including alternation of power at the national level, there are still concerns about the overall integrity of our electoral process. And the warning is that if we don't put the necessary guardrail, around our democracy, there is a possibility of relapse into electoral authoritarianism. Electoral authoritarianism, for those who want to know, is a type of authoritarian regime where governments hold regular elections, multi-party elections, but they use widespread and systematic manipulation to ensure they win. These regimes maintain a facade of democracy while violating liberal democratic standards, often by controlling the election process to suppress opposition rather than engage in genuine competitions. In fact, the literature about the recession of democracy is very rampant about these issues. Everybody talks about democratic backsliding. Now, the central concern of this conference, however, is that since we returned to democracy in 1999, it has been marked by rising poverty levels. And I think Dr. Hussaini Abdu rolled out those downsides of our democracy, including the fact that whereas in 2014, we were third behind China and India, by 2018, we overtook all of them in terms of poverty indicators and then became the poverty capital of the world. This is very concerning to so many of us. And of course, looking at Human Development Index and all other measures of development, including Fragile State Index, we are very low. And this is quite shocking for the giant of Africa. And I think it's important that the organizers of this conference have not posed the question of effective governance outside democracy as the overarching framework. And I say this because if you go back to the literature on good governance, we realize that it was popularized by the World Bank. And then if you look at the World Bank conception of good governance, they are talking about how to run an effective state In fact, until the 1990s, the World Bank never believed in democracy. They believed in strong governments and authoritarian rule, and later they came to the realization that, look, we all need democracy. So if you look at that conception of governance, it's talking about a state that is clean and effective, and that you can in fact have good and effective governance without democracy. But I think the choice African people have made, including Nigeria, is that we don't only need good governance, we need good governance in the context of a functional democracy. And that is all the striving that we are doing.
Thank you. Without much ado, I would really like to say very few important profiling for our next speaker, who is of utmost importance to this conversation. The conversation we're having here is going to be very detailed, but I like that he sets the tone, and he's no other person than the Global Energy Executive, former presidential candidate and founding Deputy National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party, is one of the few Nigerian leaders who combine solid business records with a strong political background. He is a successful entrepreneur with a 33-year impeccable business history and chairman of Oil World Limited. And also he's a chairman of Basin AS Limited, owners of the 90 megawatts Marlborough Independent Power Producing Plant. He is generally acknowledged as a principled and courageous man. Please, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome for his exceptional presentation of his address, and he's no other person than Joel Wenga Olawekbo Hashim. Please, a round of applause. Please make your way to the stage, sir.
The Executive Director of Parker, indefatigable Chief Eze Nwago, the civil society aristocracy in the front seat. Well, I just had to amend slightly what Professor Egu said. He said the ruling class. The panelists who are well known to me, and then I must acknowledge somebody on my entourage, the chairman of the PDP FCT chapter, Alhaji Ismail. And he came with all the local government, that is area council chapter chairman. Please put your hands together for them. The future of democracy in Nigeria, building institutions that outlast election. Today in West Africa, it could be easy to say democracy is under retreat. Half a dozen of countries that have either been democratic in West Africa are today governed by military dictators. The other half a dozen that our attention are focused on are actually struggling military dictatorship, challenged on the street literally every day by the various oppositions in their country. This is the situation in most of West Africa. As a matter of fact, the question of whether democracy is desirable or not had been put as a popular question in Nigeria during the End Bad Governance protest. where we had young people in major cities of Nigeria waving the flag of Russia and putting up the poster of Vladimir Putin, who had been passed on as a dictator, a successful, benevolent dictator. We had scenarios where young men went to military barracks to ask soldiers to take over power. Now the question is that this specter is contrary to where some of us came from. People like Eze, Umakari, Professor now, and a host of young men of those generations who were raising the banner of democratization in Nigeria. We didn't just speak for it. Some of us paid dearly for it. And we were ready to pay the supreme price. I was a Decree 2 detainee in 1989. We were all inspired by the allure of democracy. And we promised our people virtually that the return to democracy will make things better. Nigeria in Africa in 1989 was the epicenter of the struggle for democracy in the whole of Africa. From Lagos to Jos, Benin, we were part of the worldwide struggle for democratization, which was also in 1989 very popular in Eastern Europe, from Gdansk in Poland to Russia, USSR, where the General Secretary then, Mikhail Gorbachev, was reforming the authoritarian model of communism in Russia and asking for change through perestroika and glasnost. It was a worldwide movement that hit the street of Tiananmen in China as well. Democracy was a very popular currency in those days. So what made democracy attractive? Why is it no longer attractive in Nigeria? Why is the relevance and continuation of democracy being put to question? Before I answer this question, let me briefly visit what is democracy. Democracy is a government in which supreme power, sovereignty, is rested in the people and exercised directly by them or by their elected agent under a free electoral system. Abraham Lincoln called it a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Democracy can either be parliamentary or presidential, depending on the specific history. But the principal thing about democracy is that it makes provision for institution that preserves natural rights. That is the basic bottom line. And these natural rights are innate, they are natural to all human beings. So democracy only sets up structure and institutions and system to preserve those natural rights. Those natural rights are freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. These are natural things that God created human beings with. And as Fela will say, human rights are my property. So democracy only sets up to protect that which is inalienable in human beings. We made those points in our paper on challenges of democratization, University of Jos, 2003. Interestingly, that paper was presented when Professor Ego was the head of department. So it's a delight to hear him again 20-something years after, because some of the issues that were raised are still germane till today. As has been said, in a democracy, we must have periodic elections. In a democracy, we must not just have periodic elections, but this election must be credible, transparent, and competitive. Competition means you must have parties that are free, then you must have institutions of states that protect rights, that are independent of arbitrary control. And that brings me to our experience since 1999, when Nigeria returned to democracy. Our political parties have struggled as vehicles of state capture of power than as vehicles to deliver social justice, equity, or even to permit the discussion of how these noble ideas of democracy are to be achieved. I think we had more debates about policy options under military rule in Nigeria than we have had under democracy. Under the military rule, we had the Politburo debate, whether we wanted to go a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. Under military rule, the military were not bold enough to remove fuel subsidy without making contingent plan for measures to cushion the effect. As a matter of fact, under Abacha, a PTF was created to manage, to ensure that the differential in the little increase that was made is properly managed for institutions in education, health, etc., so that the people can see the benefit of it. No military leader throughout our history had the temerity to do 100% removal of subsidy. But these have happened under our democracy. They never happened under military. So if you see people questioning, is this democracy worth it or not? Include the aspiration and the needs of the people, whether they are poor or rich, or whether they belong to the middle class. In conclusion, I delivered this warning in 2003 in a paper titled Challenges of African Democratization, which I already said was delivered in the University of Jos. In fact, the executive director of PACA represented me. I wrote the paper, but he delivered it. And I warned them that if African democratizing nations don't provide prosperity for their people, very soon all of them will be back under military dictatorship. In conclusion, we are sad that legal and institutional reform alone will not make democracy sustainable in Nigeria. Social justice and social inclusion is governance to make democracy retain its allure. As the young people are fond of saying, make it make sense. We must make democracy make sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Another round of applause, please. Another round of applause. I think he deserves a standing ovation. Please, can we rise all and celebrate that apt, very detailed, intellectual, layered address that spoke not just to the political elite, but to us, a consciousness as citizens. Please, a round of applause for him. Thank you so much. Thank you so, so much. And, you know, just taking it from there as I go to take my seat to start the panel in earnest, one of the things he said, and I think it echoed with the first question I asked when I started this morning was, do you think that we have a democracy? Do you believe in our democracy? And a lot of people said no. Some said yes. But one thing I heard him say when he stood up there, he said our democracy is on a retreat. But that doesn't mean it does not exist. And he also pointed out that in a democracy, we must have periodic elections, not just periodic elections, but we must have independence of the institutions that are free of arbitrary control. Please, another round of applause. He has layered and made our conversation quite detailed here and has given us a charge, dear panelists, for us to x-ray and bring up, you know, recommendations from this discussion that we're about to have. And so I go straight into the meat of the matter. This panel will be looking at deepening democratic reforms for inclusive governance, and that's the subject framework for us to discuss this afternoon. I mean, from Professor Sam's address, where he talked about, you know, looking at the argument for the tenets of authoritarian regime, which a lot of people said, for instance, in China has provided a fertile ground for development and productivity. So does it mean that democracy is not working in Nigeria? What really should Nigeria be practicing? He talked about social democracy versus liberal democracy. And in elections as well, he also layered the need for the transformation for local governance, not just local government. So I will go straight into the conversation right now, and I would be starting, because, you know, when he spoke, when Mr. Joe spoke, he talked about elections, he talked about INEC. I know you know I was coming to you. And, you know, he talked about the true independence of the Independent National Electoral Commission as an institution. And I would like to start with you, Alhaji Shehu. You are the resident electoral commissioner for Nasarawa State. And listening to what His Excellency said earlier, he talked about the true independent nature of our Independent National Electoral Commission. And that the independence of election is a gateway, first of all, to truly recognizing the roadmap to democracy and accountability. So I would want to ask you really, from your vantage point as a state rec, how can we then strengthen institutional independence? How can we strengthen institutional independence and accountability at the subnational level? Because, you know, I'm tying it, first of all, that elections are first local because they are closer to the people. So how can we tie it? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Like you've rightly introduced me, I'm the resident electoral commissioner for Nasarawa State. One thing that perhaps is good to understand and know about me is the fact that for 34 years and 7 months, I was a staff of INEC as a civil servant. That I'm now a rec is not a promotion, it's a different appointment. That's political appointment. And what I found is that the functions and the responsibilities of INEC as an agency to conduct election remains the same. How well the individuals that man these offices perform now lies with several factors, several, including the kind of accountability and the engagement by civil society. One is your own personal conviction. I have my ideas of how I think things should be done as far as election administration is concerned. And I see my appointment as a resident electoral commissioner as an opportunity for me to do some of the things that I believe ought to be done to ensure that elections were conducted. The institution remains the same, the functions remain the same, the powers remain the same, but the individuals and the values with which you go into this, manage these offices matters so much. I'm worried as a Nigerian that we must not let this democracy fail. I'm also concerned and conscious of the fact that for so many people, democracy is seen within the realm of conduct of election. Election is at the center of democracy. So if I am now in charge of managing election, that process, I hold the people a duty to ensure that they truly elect the people they so desire. That I actualize by the way I manage all the pre-election activities. And it's important we get this argument very clear. When we say beyond the poll, that poll is not election. Several activities went before the poll. Parties were registered. The process of registering political parties and management of political parties is at the heart of having credible election at the end of the day. Where the party registration or the management of political parties ab initio is warped. It's one in which ordinary citizens, those who have the appeal of the people, are unable to be fielded as candidates. Such that at the end of the day, you have a set of elements that are candidates at elections that do not really appeal to the people. The battle is already getting lost, and I think we should understand that. A gentleman approached me, sorry that I have to do that. A gentleman approached me, he's a student of University of National State University. The people in his community love him so much because the guy has been a grassrooter, very nice guy. And his challenge is that I want to contest election. My people want me, but this guy does not have money. So the first challenge, how does he even get nominated by his party? And these are things that people forget when we lose confidence in election. Sometimes confidence is lost in election before the poll.
Thank you very much, Easy. I think I will start by adopting all the comments and positions put forward by earlier speakers. And the comments just underscore the point I will make around the trajectory of democracy that we have experienced from 1960 to date. In the 1970s, the government of Bhutan is in Asia, initiated a major policy on development. And that policy was that the government committed itself to looking at development not from gross national product or gross national output, but from what it called gross national happiness. And the fundamentals with respect to gross national happiness or gross domestic happiness was that a government that addresses inequality, unemployment, and poverty will provide a safe, joyous, and prosperous society where confidence between the state and the citizens will be strong, where people live lives that are predictable, that when you are engaging the judiciary, you know that the judiciary is predictable. When you are engaging the legislature, you know that the legislature is predictable on the basis of what it will do or should do as the face of governance.
So the next question, Honorable, and my question is, how can the legislature ensure effective oversight of the executive to prevent corruption and abuse of power once elected officials take office?
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, our electoral circle, we're going through a constitutional review now, and we have been inviting the public to bring their submissions and memos in order to take advantage of this regime to amend the Constitution, and so that it's more a living document that will help Nigeria move forward. Now, post-elections, when people come into office, first, I would like to say, most of us that come into office take an oath of office, and we swear to, of our different faiths, to uphold our Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I'd like to say, many of us don't know what we have done by taking that oath. That oath is to God Almighty, your Creator. That oath is to Nigerians who entrusted their vote to you. And that oath is for you, yourself, to ensure that you abide by that oath in carrying out your assignment over whatever office you are going to hold. And so, if we do well in the offices that we are entrusted with, of course, Nigerians are good people who want to bring you back. But we have seen a time where people feel that if it's not only them in office, no one else can do that job. And I say, we are all growing. Time will tell. Age will catch up with people, and a generation is waiting and watching, and people are taking that resolve that when I go there, I will not do like the former generation that has gone there.
My thoughts on this, we work mainly with women. And I'll use Kano as an example because we have an office in Kano. When we had the 2023 general elections, of course, when you do an audit, you find out that there was no woman in Kano, even in the State House of Assembly. However, with some engagement with the women at the grassroots and at different levels, by the time they went into the local government elections, Kano produced, I think, one female local government chair and a female vice. And the female local government chair is now the Argon chair in Kano State. So there's an element of when we have these conversations, you just don't take it. Go and walk with it. And I think on our own part at civil society organizations, it's not just arm them, stay behind them all the way so that we're providing that technical support, that intellectual support. Even at times we put our money behind them. They need lawyers, we provide the legal advice because they don't have the resources. The kind of people we want do not have the type of resources that the ones we don't want have. So if we come together, we have to put our mouth where we believe we could make an impact. And I don't think this needs donor support. I'll buttress that too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panelists. They have done justice to this topic, and our panelists have been the Honorable Dr. Joshua Audugana, member of the House of Representatives. Also, we have Mrs. Kemi Okeyodo. He's a member of the Civil Society organization here, and Dr. Sam Amadi. He is also, Dr. Sam Amadi is my friend, an academia professor of political science. And then Samuel Folorenshaw is an ICT innovative specialist, a civil tech. Please, another round of applause for them, please.
Having had such a delightful session with so much insights being delivered by these distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like us to have the communique, and this is majorly capturing what has been discussed today, as well as also areas that we can take as recommendations for the press and also for citizens who are well gathered here, and also for subsequent engagement. And so I will be reading out the communique for this conference. This is the communique issued at the PACA National Conference on the Future of Democracy in Nigeria, Sustaining Democratic Reforms Beyond Polls for Effective Governance, held on October 22, 2025 at the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, Conference Hall, Abuja. The Preparing Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, with support from partners and democratic stakeholders, convened its national conference on the future of democracy themed Sustaining Democratic Reforms Beyond the Polls for Effective Governance. The conference brought together a broad spectrum of participants, including representatives from the Independent National Electoral Commission, civil society organizations, political party, academia, the media, security agencies, youth, women groups, to critically examine the challenge and prospect of Nigeria's democracy. And during the goodwill message, we heard one very particular message, which is that participants emphasize that nobody is coming to save us until we decide to save ourselves. The collective resolve must therefore be to build a homegrown democratic system that reflects the realities, culture, and aspirations of Nigerians. And in the keynote address, we saw that it was noted that democracy in Nigeria faces the paradox of showing signs of consolidation while failing to meet citizens' needs. The gap between governance and the people's expectation must be bridged through institutional reforms, civic participation, and accountability mechanisms. And furthermore, democracy and good governance are inseparable. The World Bank's evolution from skepticism to support for democracy reflects this global truth, just like was said by Professor Samegu. Nigeria must enlarge the frontier of effective governance by rethinking liberal democracy and adapting it to local realities. Democracy is about the relationship between citizens and leaders, one sustained by elections that reward integrity and punish mediocrity. To build resilient institutions, Nigeria must prioritize constitutionalism, inclusion, and accountability at all levels of governance. This conference also emphasized that while liberal democracy as designed in the West may not fully fit African context, Nigeria's democratic journey must evolve toward a social democracy that meets citizens' fundamental needs. And during the panel session, the following key points were noted: that the panelists from INEC, civil society, and academia examined how weak political institutions undermine democratic growth. And some of the points that were raised include public confidence in elections is the bedrock of democracy. When people lose trust in the electoral outcomes, democratic legitimacy is eroded. Nigeria's political parties have become elite-dominated structures rather than people-driven organizations. They are often serve as vehicles for personal ambition rather than platforms for governance and ideology. The collapse of internal party democracy began when executive interference replaced collective leadership within parties. Technology offers a pathway to transparency, but its benefit depends on integrity and public trust in the institutions that are deploying it. Civil society organizations must intensify grassroots engagement to ensure INEC and political parties remain accountable to citizens. Participants also noted a decline in voter turnout and urged reforms to re-energize public participation through civic education, transparency, credible electoral processes. And during the second panel session, we also noted that Nigeria's democratic culture remains weak due to over-centralization of power, patronage politics, and disregard for the rule of law. Local governance remains neglected, with state governors dominating the political landscape while local government autonomy remains theoretical. Imbalance of power and weak engagement from youth and civic institutions like NANS and MBA have reduced the quality of public discourse and oversight. The use of technology and artificial intelligence was highlighted as a critical innovation for modernizing electoral processes and ensuring accountability. True democracy must be measured by citizens' well-being, freedom, and inclusion, not just periodic elections. And then the key recommendations are as followed. At the close of deliberation, participants agreed on the following actionable recommendations: to enforce internal democracy within parties and build citizens-owned structures that promote ideology over individual ambition; to ensure genuine autonomy and capacity for local governments to deliver services and engage citizens; institutionalize voter and civic education in schools and communities to build a culture of participation; guarantee the independence and adequate funding of INEC, the judiciary, and other oversight institutions; demand integrity, transparency, and responsiveness from elected officials through citizen monitoring and open data; use digital tools, artificial intelligence, and e-governance systems to improve transparency, service delivery, and electoral management; strengthen collaboration between government and civil society to safeguard freedom of expression, association, and participation; mainstream women, youth, and persons with disabilities in governance and policy making; promote ethical leadership and constitutionalism as pillars of Nigeria's democratic culture. And in conclusion, the conference concluded that Nigeria's democracy must evolve beyond elections to effective governance, anchored on inclusion, accountability, and citizens' empowerment. As one participant aptly stated, vote who needs to be in power, no matter their political party. And another said, we must make democracy make sense. PACA reaffirms its commitment to working with stakeholders, government, citizens, civil society, and development partners to build institutions that outlast elections, deliver the dividends of democracy to all Nigerians. Thank you very, very much.
They are bold.
The clock is ticking, and already people are taking stock of how 2025